I wanted to start by asking what drew you to the work of Dingy?
I first encountered his work. I think he was in an art fair or in a group show. I can't remember quite the right occasion, but I think it was almost 10 years ago. Actually, it was probably 2015, something like that. And I was intrigued about, this kind of a carefully carved out sign and the layers of layers, and then taking away some of the paint to kind of concentrate on the sign symbol, on the plus or the X, and I was intrigued about this almost obsessive somehow type of art making. And at the very beginning, actually, it reminded me of Western artists like um, Agnes Varda, for instance, with the old geometric pattern, for instance, or even close to my home, Giorgio Morandi, who did for 60 years. He just painted, you know, bottles and cups and glasses, and he didn't do anything else. And it kind of a suspended time in that way. And I was actually had the same feeling, but I didn't really formulate. And I'm just kind of I formulated much afterwards. And I was actually I was struck by this approach. And then I researched a bit on his work, and then I figured it out. He was working with Timothy Taylor Gallery. So through the gallery, I asked to organize a meeting next time Dingy was in London, and it was, I think, 2018, so 6 years ago. And Dingy doesn't speak English, so we had to kind of arrange a meeting with a friend of mine, and then a friend of hers, several meetings somehow, and to just to chat about his approach, his work, his very details about, he's very articulated and details about the practice of the work. And that was also very interesting in the bigger picture of what was behind the work somehow. And then from those conversations a few years ago, I started the idea to make an exhibition in Europe, because he's super well known in the Asian region, specifically in China and the South Asia part of it. But it's not really has not been presented, his work, to the public or the general public in Europe, for instance. It is in some collection. He had a residency at the in Oxford at some point. The British Museum has his work, but it never really has been present. And they had actually a small show, there is a sole exhibition at Icon Gallery in Birmingham in the 90s, because at that time, Jonathan Watkinson, he was the curator of, I think it was the Shanghai Biennial, I can't remember, many years ago, and included his work in the biennial. And then basically he invited him to do a solo show. But and I kind of I missed the show at that time, and I got the documentation, and it was kind of a small show in Birmingham. So basically, he kind of escaped the attention of both of the large public, and also of the professional sort of the critics, the curators, the museum directors, etc., etc. And from those conversations, so we come up with the idea, okay, let's organize something. And then we started to talk about venues, and finding the right venues for his work. And um, and then, this whole kind of a conversation with Château La Coste came about. And since then, it has been 5 years in the making. So it has been actually quite a long journey, but a very rewarding journey.
So Dingy works with the motif of the cross in his work, and he's done that through his career. And you frame that quite interestingly as having a predictive and a retrospective aspect, both in terms of the binary fixation of contemporary society and in terms of how it reflects uh, the history of his context for the past 30 or 40 years. Could you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, that was also the rationale of the exhibition somehow, because when you talk with him, he's really interesting in the actual practice of the actual making the painting and the process and the meaning and the symbolic meaning of the sign. And for me, it was there was an interesting bridge there between this type of approach to spiritualism, if you want, to this idea of meditation, to concentrate on the repetition of a sign in different patterns, in different motifs, with different layerings, but really kind of either adding or taking away this, it's super interesting in the surface and the effect of the surface. And it's very detailed, but if you look from the distance, it's a whole universe. And to me, it was really reminding to this kind of a universal matrix of the binary codes. And he started his career in the 80s. So he has been on this journey for more than 40 years. And to me, there was this almost this kind of a tension between this idea of the gesture as a repetition, as a carving out a space in itself, which transcends time. And I go back to my reference, my early reference to Giorgio Morandi, for instance. Like Morandi, throughout these 40 years, a massive number of things happen. Cultural revolution, economic boom, economic bust, and ideology, and the decline of the American dream, and the rise of Asia and South Asia actually as a power force in the economics of the world, and at the same time, actually, this has been that you can see these things in these paintings. You can literally see them in abstraction, and for me it was a very powerful thing because it was transcending time and still mapping time, still telling the time. So in that sort of thing, it was kind of a retrospective of society over the last 40 years in a very, very unusual way. But at the same time, the other side of the tension for me was that his approach to visuals, it totally kind of foresaw the binary aesthetics. When you open a website and you go to the code page, I remember the early website, you can just click and the whole code page appear. Now they kind of took it away. But anyway, it's a series of numbers and ciphers and letters, and that you don't really see anything, but you know that those kind of characters, those symbols are leading you to knowledge. They are leading you to text, images, sounds, videos. And for me, it was actually the same thing. It was like his work, it was almost generative art before generative art because it concentrated on the visual aspect, apparently random, but with a logic in it. And the logic was actually precisely that it was actually anticipating time and at the same time mapping time in retrospect. And that's the duality of his work, and that's how I frame conceptually somehow.
Could you actually talk about some of the works in the show?
I think his work it's quite it goes on bodies of work over a number of years. So and another thing actually that I included in the curatorial process, it was to reference his work throughout the 4 decades. So we had one work goes back to the 80s, which was very much sort of almost graphic in that sense, with very bold color and very big signs, kind of a. And there were a fantastic value work here of the 90s, which was more rough, if you want. It was at that time he was working on raw canvases or on linen, on Utah, sometimes on tartan. So in materials that they were already made somehow for another purpose, and then adding this layering of patterns and crosses and excesses and vertical lines, horizontal, like these grids somehow, almost as a gestural aspect. And it was working with, for instance, with charcoal, with chalk, so very, very raw material in a way. And and we included some of the pieces which are actually as from his own personal collection. One thing that I would like to point out, that all the works came from his studio directly, and it has been really difficult because his work are not really readily available. He's working alone. He doesn't have any assistant. It takes ages to make one piece, and it works on kind of a big sizes. And as soon as the work is finished, and it can take years, and is completely immediately allocated and consigned to either museums, institution, foundation, galleries, etc., etc. And that's why it took 5 years to put together this show, because I really wanted to discuss with Dean Gee each of their works, and to have the work there in the studio ready to be actually shipped to Europe. And these bodies, these few works from the 90s actually are belonging to his archive, his personal archive, so they're not on the market, so to speak. And then you have the 2000s and the noughties time, and the tens as well, where he worked really much. He kind of increased the size, and they started to work on specific layering. So rather than adding layer upon layer of materials, he started to add them and then take away and carve out the symbol. So in a way, he reversed the process. Ultimately, reverse engineering the process. It went through the 20s before, and the science and the pattern and this universe of the universal matrix appears by taking away material and not adding material. And to me, it was really, really interesting as a way to revisit actually that type of visuality. And then lately, in the second part of the tens and the 2020s, he referenced more personal experience as well. And for instance, there was a series of works which reference to the economic boom of Shanghai and the architectural shape of the physical skyline of Shanghai, because for him actually it was really kind of it had an impact. It had an immediate impact on his life. So seeing this kind of a high rays sprouting out actually all around him, it really made an impression. And you can see those economic boom really through the canvases, and they has also a series of body which we call it like the night skies, which are this kind of is more about constellations, and there's also a bit of a memory trip in a way, because when he started to go around the world, he remembered when he was a child, he was living on an island, and he was taking the boat with his dad to go to Shanghai, and he was taking this boat at nighttime. And he remembered as a little kid looking up and seeing all this constellation and thing, and that came back like 40 years back somehow in this beautiful deep blue works with this type of I mean, they're not type of constellation. Some of them actual constellation, but obviously you have to know they're an actual constellation because it's all kind of a mix up with, you know, these symbols, these signs, the crosses, the X's. But you know that's kind of it has for me was important to create this journey somehow. Also because it was it's a sort of a major survey of his work in Europe that he goes to the UK afterwards, and it was important to present the journey to a large public, and so to make kind of a the not only the process and the techniques and the actual craft of the work available, but also the conceptual part of it.
Thank you. That's actually what I was going to come to. This is the first major European survey and institutional survey of Dingy's work. So, how did that shape your curation of the show?
You know, we like challenges, both me and him. So when it came to the Château La Coste agreement, the state has, I think, 9 architectural pavilion. Most of them are actually dedicated art spaces. So you can actually, you know, you have very different architectural features and environment where you can stage an exhibition. And and we chosen the most difficult one, obviously, which is the Oscar Niemeyer pavilion and auditorium. Is the latest pavilion, architectural pavilion at Château La Coste. It opened recently and is a beautiful architecture with this curved line in on the top of the hill, and they had to, you know, trek a bit to go up there in the middle of this vineyard, all white with the water around it. But the challenge is that is a basically a glass pavilion. And so there is only one wall actually, and we have a painting show. So how do you kind of create an exhibition of painting in a glass pavilion? That was the question somehow. So but Dinghy really also wanted that pavilion. He really strongly wanted that features in that architectural context, and I completely agree with him. There is this geometrical element, this architectural element, this sculptural element of this work, and this that are really chime with the space. And in one of the visits I did, I noticed, for instance, there are basically to shape the curatorial display, let's say, I reference 2 elements of the architecture. And the first element that I noticed when I was there, it was that the floor has certain joints in the structure, and the joints are not perpendicular, but they're at odd angle, like a 70 degrees angle. So because the pavilion is kind of a very fluid and very sort of a round shape somehow. There's not one single straight angle in the whole building. And even the angles actually of the floor, they're not perpendicular, but are kind of a 70 degrees. So they're kind of an interesting off. And I was wondering why they did it actually, that type of joint with that angle. And I think it was precisely because probably Niemeyer didn't really want to have anything perpendicular in the building. So he chose this kind of an odd angle. And I decided, well, that's a that's a good reference for me to position works. So I position the works in the middle of the space, in the middle of the volume, according to those angles. So I follow basically the joints in the floor to position the structure that actually hold up the paintings. And the structure themselves, I noticed when I was there that the glass all around the pavilion has a black joint between pane of glass and pane of glass. So they're kind of the glasses are basically a meter, something, a meter and 20 maybe, and they are joined by this black joint, vertical, floor to ceiling, and they reference that. So I designed basically this structures, this bars, black bars, mats, that it goes from floor to ceiling. and they hold up the painting. And the painting that we have chosen are painting from different eras, different years, different decades as well, but they have exactly the same size. And so I kind of pair the paintings around these bars, almost sandwiching the bar. And so the viewer can go into the pavilion. It doesn't have a painting exhibition on the wall. It have a painting exhibition in the middle of the space, and he can go, or she can go around actually and go back. So you create a journey, and which goes from the 80s till the 2023. And that really worked very, very well. And then he was he sent me also a very touchy, nice letter afterwards saying it has been an incredible experience, and he has never exhibited a painting in that way. And and I was really honored because he trusted me, because I mean he didn't see the space before, only in pictures, only in rendition and 3D rendering, but never really in person. So he had somehow to put his trust into me as a curator to figure it out a way that it was making sense of his work, but and curatorially being very, very appealing and in tune with the space. As a curator, I very often I start from the viewer exhibition, from the viewer experience, from the space where the viewer will be. And that could be an architectural pavilion, or it could be a kitchen, or it could be a virtual space. So it's always, for me, it's important to position myself in the viewer shoes, so to speak, and to say, okay, I'm here. What are my experiences in this moment? And that's where I started to the curatorial journey somehow for finding the right display solution for an exhibition.
My last question pivots to you to ask you what's next for you.
Well, I run a museum of art, media, and technology, the Museum at Northwestern Qatar in Doha, the Media Majlis Museum. And we have next an exhibition on the Arabic language from multiple point of views. It's called The Limit of My World, The Limit of My Language or The Limit of My World, which is a quote from Wittgenstein. And the idea is to unpack this theme about language through different disciplines, because we are a hybrid museum. So we unpack a theme through art, obviously, but also through media production, through social science, through communication, through journalism, through anthropology, through a number of technology, obviously. So, it's a very interdisciplinary type of approach of the exhibition we make. And that opens at the end of August. And then in January, we will open an exhibition on the relationship between AI and investigative journalism, which is another big group show. In the meantime, we'll do an exhibition offsite for the Web Summit in Doha, and next February, I'm bringing the IKT Congress and post-Congress to the Gulf region for the first time. The IKT is the International Association of Curators of Contemporary Art, and we are going to do a Congress and post-Congress in the region for the first year, early next year. With my kind of a colleague, Auronda Scalera, we are also working as a curatorial duo on art and technology. We have some teaching courses doing in Paris at the Yale University on art and new technology. An exhibition to shape, which is called Web to Verse, which is the second iteration of an exhibition we started last year. Which interestingly, we want to experiment and stage completely on the metaverse. And it will be follow up with a physical exhibition. And then we have something that we don't know if it's happen or not, because we can reveal it at the moment. We didn't sign on the dotted line, but it could be a big media festival. So that's in the next 8 months, let's say.